I never get these offers.
I actually know this cousin. So he was in my bunk in Kapagoda when I was at JC. Then, but he is now. Zukta Hilim Gemara. So we are up to the two dots on Daf Chav Ches Amud Beis. Okay, gewaltig. Oh, I'm pumped today. I walked today. Yeah. Well, I didn't walk until Shemayim. I walked because my car's at the shop. Okay, Zukta Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'mischaven chayiv. So when we learned the Mishnah, it was a little bit cryptic what that meant. So let's look back at the Mishnah and see if we could figure it out. Nishbur akadei b'shus harabim, v'huchlak echad b'mayim, or shalaka b'charos is chayiv. And we learned that to understand this line of the Mishnah, it's actually a machlokes Rashi and Rav and Shmuel. Rav learned that a bar, if it belongs to you, it's not a bar, and therefore the reason why you're chayiv is because this is considered shar hamazik. Therefore, you're chayiv cipher adam, cipher kelim. Shmuel hold even if you weren't mafgert, it still is bar. It still is bar, but he holds that a bar who that injures a person or will be chayiv, and Shmuel learns that we're talking about where a person was injured. Let's see what we have over here. That's right. Okay, and if you're chayiv for kelim, it's only because of Rabbi Yehuda who holds you're chayiv on nishke kelim babar. But Shmuel will have to learn that our Mishnah is speaking only if it's a person. Okay, gewaltig. Okay, gewaltig. So now we have Rabbi Yehuda came along and said something else. Yehuda came along and said, "B'mischaven chayiv b'ein mischaven poter." So what is it talking about? What was done b'miskaven? What was done not miskaven? So we need to figure out what this is. So the Gemara says as follows: Heichidami miskaven. What does the Mishnah mean when it says miskaven? What does Rabbi Yehuda mean when it says miskaven? Amar Rabba, I need a coffee. I'm not having two coffees. It's kishmak. Thank you. Amar Rabba, b'mischaven lahirida lamata mikseifa. What is the case here? B'mischaven lahirida lamata mikseifa. How did this whole thing happen? Zok Rashi, he had his jug on the shoulder, and he was trying to lower it down, and he fumbled. V'niskal v'hotcha b'koisel. It smashed into the koisel and broke. Chayiv, that makes the person chayiv. You know why? The niskal poisheyahu. For a human to fumble, that's called a poisheya, and therefore he's chayiv for whatever his bor does. Amar le'Abaye, Zok Abaye. We know that Reb Meir argues on this Rabbi Yehuda. Even though our Mishnah doesn't quote Reb Meir, we're soon going to see a brisa that does quote Reb Meir, who argues on this Rabbi Yehuda. So Mechlal the Mechayiv Reb Meir afilu nifshira. If Rabbi Yehuda is done his mekel, and he says, "Eina mischaven," means mischaven lahirida. He wasn't even planning to lower it down, and a complete oinus happened. That's when I'm going to be potter. But if I had kavanah to lower it and then I fumbled it, I'm chayiv. Now, for Meir is more machmer than that. Meir is going to be machmer even if it was a complete oinus. I feel nifshira, which Rashi teaches as if even if it dissolves in his hand, it just breaks and he's left holding the handle. So even if he didn't fumble it, even in such a oinus gomer, even a Meir would be chayiv even for that. So Rabba answered back, yeah, as a matter of fact, that's how Machmer Reb Meir is. Mechayiv HaReb Meir, afilu ozno b'yadai. Even if you're left holding the handle of the keli, you didn't fumble it, you didn't drop it, by an onion that broke, you're going to be chayiv. Frag the Gemara, how could you justify Reb Meir being Machmer of a zoivite? Am I onusu? It's mamish an oinus. The oinus rachmana patre, and an oinus, the Torah says is potter. Dichsiv, where do you see if someone's potter for an oinus gomer? Dichsiv v'lenai relois hasedavar. A woman who is nensa, she's not muchiv misa. And if you want to make an argument, hanamini linikatala, you don't kill somebody for that. But who said you're completely not liable? Maybe you are liable, but if a zoivite, we won't kill her for it. Maybe it's chayiv. Zok tomorrow, you cannot say that is how Reb Meir learns. Why? Because Vatanya we have a brisa. Nishbur akadoi v'loy solkai. What happens if your kad broke and you didn't clean it up right away? Or nofal gamaloi v'loy hamidoi. Reb Meir mechayev v'heseikon v'chachamim oimrim poter medin adam v'chayev medin shemayim. The chachamim say poter medin adam v'chayev medin shemayim. Umoidim chachamim l'Reb Meir. The chachamim agreed to Reb Meir that you would be chayev v'avnoi sakina yumasoi shenichem b'rosh gagoy. There, even the Rabbanan would be moida that it's chayiv. Umoider of Meir Rabbanan. Here's the key word. Here is what we're looking for. Umoider of Meir Rabbanan that it will be potter. The Maila Kankanin alagag. You put jugs on the gag almanas the lagban to dry them out. V'naflu beruach she'einu mitzuya, and they were blown off the roof. Beruach she'einu mitzuya. V'zika into damage. So potter. So how could you say that Reb Meir would say it's chayiv even if it was an oinus? We have this brisa saying quite clearly that Reb Meir would pater in a case of an oinus. So therefore we're stuck. According to Rabbi's pshat, we cannot understand what is the reason why Reb Meir would be chayiv. Okay, I want to stop a second because I remembered that I forgot something. Yesterday, I said I didn't understand. What does Rashi mean that just because there's a shaila of Isra v'Heter here, there's a shaila of the Eved wanting to live with his wife of 50 years, who was a Shefcha Knainis, but now that he's free, now that Yovel came, he's not married to her anymore. He's no longer an Eved Ivri, and it's also for him to be with her. And if he wants to be with her, the other could beat him up. Like Rashi says, to be mafish someone from Yisura, you can beat him up. Right? And we were wondering, you're allowed to beat somebody up? You're allowed to beat somebody up to stop them from doing mitzvahs? You imagine every day there'd be brawls in shul. How you talking? The other question that some of the Rishonim ask is, Oy bazoi, if someone's trying to steal from me, I should also be able to do it. Why? Not because I'm dodin l'nafshe. Ich will ein Matzel sein, ich will ein Ratevin, von sein Oiver für Sigsoil. No? Nicht halt sie, ich hatte schon mehr. The geld go nicht. Ich meine, ich will nicht sondern Sündigen, right? So the Yamshel Shloimeh says that this halacha that we're learning, that you're allowed to beat somebody up, not to do an avera, that's not anybody can do that. Only somebody who's completely nucky kisoilas from averis, who you know it's kol kula l'shem shemaim, without any shemitz of shaloi l'shma. That's a person who is allowed to do it. Everybody else can. And as Mati says, that's most people like Mati.
See that wants someone to give a get.
Who's talking about a get?
They pick the guy up to give a get.
I don't see them. No, I don't see them at all. It's not only see them at all. So that is Allah. So it's not so posh. Halacha l'maisa, we would be hard pressed to find somebody who would be allowed to take advantage of this thing. Okay. I'll call upon them. We're stuck over here. What does it mean that the Yehuda says you're only chayiv in misaven, you're part of loy misaven, and by that loy misaven, your mayor says you're chayiv. Zog to Gemara, Amar Abaye. Let me tell you what's going on up here. Betarti pligi, they're arguing in both cases. Pligi b'shas nefila, they're arguing b'shas nefila, which Tosfos explains. It doesn't mean as it's falling, it hit somebody. That already might be Adabamazik. It means when it fell before there was a chance to pick it up. So, Pligi b'shas nefila, and Rashi, I'll read it inside. Reb Meir Pasheyahu chayiv kol Kamma delehava lepnai lesalek kari shas nefila. So the argument with shas nefila meaning as soon as it fell, if someone came and tripped on it, that's number one. They're arguing upligi la'achar nefila, and they're also arguing after a while already if you would have already had a chance to pick it up. So let's understand why they would be arguing before nefila. What would be the question, and what would be the question la'achar nefila? Zokt Abaye. Pligi b'shas nefila. Niskal pasheya. If as soon as it fell, someone came along and tripped over it, am I responsible or am I not responsible? If niskal is poishaya, if you hold that if someone fumbles something, he's responsible for damages that it causes, then you're going to be chayiv, which is the shita of Reb Meir. But Rabbi Yehuda holds Marsavar Niskal Pashayahu Reb Meir holds Niskal Pashayahu will be chayiv, and Marsavar Niskal La Pashayahu. And Rabbi Yehuda holds Niskal La Pashayahu. So what does Nischaven mean? Nischaven Loirida, indeed. Nischaven Loirida, if I was planning to put it down and it slipped, I'm sorry. Fakert. Nischaven Loirida and it slipped is Niskal. In that case, Rabbi Yehuda would hold its potter. So Nischaven Loirida means he was happy to break it, even if he wanted to break it. Even if he dropped it on purpose, he didn't care if it would break. There he's going to be chayiv. But if I was trying to put it down neatly, I didn't want it to fall, and it fell, that's a niskal. I'm not responsible for damages that are caused by this thing that fell. That is the first machlokes. But pligi la'acha nefila. There's also a machlokes. What happens if I had time to pick it up, and instead of picking it up, the mafker nizokaf, I was mafker. So if I'm after it, it's not mine anymore, and maybe I shouldn't be responsible for damages that it causes. Mar savar mafkin izakav chayiv, umar savar potter. There's a machlokes. If you're mafker the bor and it's not yours, are you chayiv for bor or not? Reb Meir holds yes, and Rabbi Yehuda holds no. So let's see, because this is a little bit funny, because bor means I leave something which is a rabbin, right? So we have to figure out what this machlokes is. So Baruch Hashem we have Rashi and Tosfos actually. Zokt Rashi, b'mafkin izokov kagoyin zeh. If you drop your kalim on the floor and they smash, you're a mafkin them. You don't want broken pieces of a kalim. The mistama mafkin l'charosov. Reb Meir savar mafkin izokov chayiv. Why? And here's our key point. The bar shechayiv of Torah, the bar b'shus harabim, the hefker hu chayiv. And that's the pashut way to understand it. I dig a hole in Rabbim, nothing's mine here. Yet I'm still responsible for it. So you see clearly, even if it doesn't belong to me, the Torah is being mechayiv me for all the damages caused. Rabbi Yehuda the Savar Potter Sfirle, the Hifker Rishusai, V'lai Hifker Bayroi, Zehu Bar Ha'amar B'Torah. It's actually referring to a bar that belongs to you. How is it possible that a bar belongs to you and it's Rishus Rabbim? Very simple. It was once your property. And then what happened is you were mafker the property around your bar, but not the actual place of the bar. So in fact, the bar is yours. You're only mechuyev for a bar that belongs to you. That is the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Udakamon pligi Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Kiva b'hamilsa. On Daf Memtes, we're going to see this machlokes. V'hachi kamar Rabbi Yehuda b'mischaven l'shoivra. If you're mischaven l'shoivra, you threw it down on purpose and you wanted it to break. V'hizik b'nefila, and it hit something as you threw it down. So it's mamish mamana mazik. Chayiv, you're going to be chayiv. Never mind out bar. It's like you throwing something at somebody. Uv'she'ein mischaven, but if you didn't want it to break it, rather you were just niskal, and the mischaven lo'irida mikseifoy, all you want to do is lower it off your shoulder. Then niskal, and you fumbled it. Then nishbra, then you're going to be potter than niskal af posheyahu. Uv'hezek tela'achan nefilanami, and even once it's on the floor, and I was a pesheya, and I'm responsible to pick it up, even then, if I'm mafkert, I'm going to be potter. The only problem is that the machlokes in the Mishnah says b'mischaven or loy mischaven. So if Abai is claiming that this is a dual machlokes, and there's literally two different machlokes happening that are being expressed by one set of words, mischaven or ein mischaven, so the machlokes of niskal pesheya makes very much sense. Rabbi Yehuda said, if I was mechaven to break it, I'm chayiv. If I wasn't mechaven to break it, but I fumbled it upon it. But how does mischaven and loy mischaven fit in when it's a case of where the bar is there b'shus harabim, I'm mechuyev to clean it up, and the shaila is if I was mafker or not. Rabbi Yehuda holds if I'm mafker, I'm potter. If I'm not mafker, I'm chayiv. How does Ibn Nischaven have anything to do with being mafker? How do the words of Ibn Nischaven chayiv and loy mischaven potter? How does that translate into Rabbi Yehuda saying that if I was mafker, I'm potter. If I wasn't mafker, I'm chayiv? Just doesn't fit into the words. So the Gemara is going to have to massage the meaning of the words to include whether or not you were mafker. Zok the Gemara, ubi the masnisim betarti. Since we're claiming that the Mishnah is actually talking about two separate cases, therefore, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. Mar Savar Mafkin Nizak of Chayv and Mar Savar Potter, which is Rabbi Yehuda. Umimai, where do you see in the Mishnah that it's speaking about two separate cases? It just says Mischavim Loideschavim. So why would you dream up that the Mishnah is talking about two different things? Talk to Gemara, because the Mishnah gives us a clue. Because the Mishnah picked two examples of what might have occurred. Midikatani Tarti, Huchlak Echad B'mayim, that's one thing. Oy Shalaka B'charasis. These are two cases of nezek. Why do I need the Mishnah to list off different scenarios of how this bar happened? One example would have been adequate. What the Mishnah must be telling us is there's two separate discussions here that are on the table. If someone slipped in the water that broke out of the jug immediately after it fell to the floor, that was the first shaila. And there's the shaila of niskal peshay or not. Oy shalaka b'charosis is la'achar nefila, and laka b'charosis means after the nefila. And the svara is that charosis you're going to be mafkir. So therefore, it's mistaber that these two cases, these two examples of bar in the Mishnah, are in fact two different cases. One is b'shas nefila, and the shaila is niskal peshay or not, and one is la'achar nefila, and the shaila is since you were mafkir the keli, you were mafkir the broken pieces. Are you now absolved from liability if someone gets hurt? If you're going to say that the Mishnah is speaking about two individual cases, then Bryce Dami Batarti. You're forced to say that the Bryce is also Batarti because it seems to be parallel to the Mishnah. So we need to see in the Brysa where you see a discussion of two different cases. So let's just look at the words of the Bryce again, so we know what we're looking for. So the Bryce says, "Nishbar akadei v'loy salkai, novel gamalei v'loy hamida." So these are the two cases that somehow the Gemara is going to have to build up. One is speaking b'shas nefila, and one is speaking lach nefila. So let's see how the Gemara resolves this. Zok the Gemara, bishlam akadei mishkachas lo oy b'shas nefila oy lach nefila. I understand the case of Kadoi might be that a damaged b'shas nefila or a damaged lach nefila. So Kadoi itself is adaptable. It could be referring to either one of the two cases in question. El Gamaloi, but the case of the Gamal that fell and I didn't pick it up, I understand if this is referring to the case of Acha nefila, and the question is if you were mafkirit mishkachas la b'mafkirit nevelasa. His camel dropped dead, and he was mafkirit, and that's where there's a shaila of whether or not you're chayiv. Yehuda will hold potter because it doesn't belong to you. The Mary holds chayiv. How in the world are you going to have a case with the camel that's going to be chayiv b'shas nefila? In other words, if you were niskal and you dropped something, when a human is niskal, you can consider that a pshia. But how can you consider it a pshia if your animal was niskal? Zokt Rashi, el b'shas nefila, heichi ikal meimar niskal pesheyahu. It doesn't make sense. Mahu yochal asois im niskal behemtai. What can you do if your animal tripped? That's not niskal b'shey. Niskal b'shey is if you yourself are a human. The bishlam in niskal hu v'nishbra kadoi. There, ikal meimar, you could say the time on him was ibayilei iyune umei. So he should be looking where he's going. El gamaloi mikal meimar haki. Can you make such a claim by gamal? So zok to Gemara. So the Gemara wants to find a case where Gamal could be Kodim Nefila. So Bishlam Lach Nefila Mishkachla B'Machpin Nevilosa B'Shas Nefila Heichem Mishkachas. So we can ask a Pasha Kasha. Maybe Gamal is the case of Lach Nefila, and Kad is the case of Kodim Nefila. In the Mishnah, in the Chanami, the water was the case of B'Shas Nefila, and the case of Kadoi is Ach Nefila, and Kadim you normally mafkert. I'm sorry.
Less of a chiddush.
Why is it less of a chiddush? They're two independent shalas that have nothing to do with the other. One is a question if you're mafker, you're bar, if you're chayiv. One is a shalah of niskal b'sheya. There's two independent questions that have nothing to do with each other. But the question is, the Gemara hasn't worked out perfectly. Let the case of la'ach nefila be the gomel, and let the case of kodim nefila be kat, and then everybody's happy. So Tosfos asked this kasha. We'll get to Tosfos in a second, but let's see the teretz. And the b'shas nefila hechem mishkachas lo. Amar Abacha kegoyin the over b'maya derech sarasad in the hara. You know why you're mechuyev? Because you took it over a road that the river had overflowed, and now the road was temporarily covered with water. Right? You see pictures of that sometimes, where the roads will get flooded. If you could have taken your gomel through a different route, where it wouldn't have had to encounter this hazard, then you're talking about paisheya. So then what's the shaila here? Everybody holds you chayiv. And if there was absolutely no other route to take, well then anasu. So everybody holds it on anas, and it should be potter. Ella, mishkachas, though, you can find the case as follows. The iskil, where he himself tripped and fell, and he was holding on to the reins, and when he fell, he pulled the animal on him. And then he said, Hashir Lashem, ki gomal oloi, because he fell and the camel fell on top of him, right? So, others are mishkachas lo, the askil, beskila be gamla. Okay. Frag the Gemara. Okay, so that takes care of that Hashayla. Now the Gemara is like mopping up the loose ends. What about the last thing we said? We said that one of the cases in the Mishnah is mafkir nechasav, if you were mafkir the bar. But how does that fit in to if the schaven chayiv, if loy nischaven potter? How does that translate into mafkir nechasav? So on that we'll see the next Gemara. Mafkir nechasav my mischaven nika. Am Rabbi Yosef be mischaven liskois b'charasel. So if you're mischaven, meaning you wanted to keep the broken pieces, meaning you were not mafkir, then you'll be chayiv. But if you didn't want to keep those broken shards, that means you're mafkir them, and therefore you're potter. Okay, we'll stop here, and now let's see Tosfos, because Tosfos' kasha was, why is the Gemara making such a big deal that Gomo doesn't make sense b'shas nefila, only lach nefila? So let it be the case of lach nefila, and let kad be the case of kodim nefila. So let's see Tosfos. Vim Toimar, so I'm on the second line of Tosfos, Ella, Gemalai, Bishlam Lach Nefila. Vim Toimar, V'lukim L'ktayu, the Shas Nefila is speaking in the case of Kadoi, V'lach Nefila Gemalai, Kinamukim Asnisin, the Huchluk Echad B'mayim was B'shas Nefila, Ashalaka B'charasis was Lach Nefila. And it'll fit in perfectly. V'yeshloim Ezak Tosfos, Chado, number one, V'shum Distam Charasis Mafkalu. The Lashon of a kad, normally it's the kad that you're going to be mafkir. You'll be mafkir your kad if it's broken. What are you going to do with broken pieces? But to stam nevela loy mafkir law kicharasus. But if your nevela dies, it's not the normal thing for you to be mafkir. No, your nevela couldn't die. If your gomel died, you won't be mafkir. You could still use the meat. You could sell the meat to be served to dogs. So why would you be mafkir? It's of great value. So the pashtus svara is that gomel you're not going to be mafkir. So the pashtus zach would be to say that gomel is being kind of nefila. Charosis, that you would be mafkir. So that's one simple practical teretz that Tosha says. It says v'loy salka in the brisa, right? It says if nafla gamaloi v'loy salkoi or nishbar kadoi v'loy. I'm sorry, it says nishbar kadoi v'loy salkoi gamaloi v'loy hamidoi. So since it says that mash with the kadoi nami hoyeloi pnai lesaling. If the Mishnah, if the brisa is saying you're not chayiv because you didn't clean it up and you could have, it must be speaking where you had time, which means it's la'ach nefila. If you're going to learn that kadai is speaking b'shas nefila, that means kadai would be actually both cases. And that already not kishmach. We want to say one case is referring to kodim nefila, and one case is after nefila. Kadai is going to be able to play on both sides of the fence. With the kadai b'tarti, gemaloi nami b'tarti. If you want to say that the first example is both, you have to say the second example is both. So therefore, you'd be forced to find a way where Gemali would also be relevant. Kodim nefila. So simple, practical. Okay. So we have to get this clear because it's going to get a little bit complex. Because we're going to have now another mahalach in this whole mission. So let's review how Abaye learned the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Chama. Abaye learned the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Chama is actually a dual machlokes. There's two separate things happening. that are all wrapped up into one case of the Mishnah. And that is the machlokes of Niskal Pesheya, as well as the machlokes as to whether or not you're chayav for bor if you don't own it. Let's take one at a time. The question of Niskal Pesheya is the case of Nishbur Akada in our Mishnah, or Nafal Gemala in the Brisa, and it caused damage because of a huklak echad b'mayim. So the question is, if Niskal Pesheya, if the fact that I fumbled and I dropped this, does that make me liable? So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't make me liable, because mischaven your chayiv. If you b'davka wanted to break this jug, so you wanted to make this water there, then you're chayiv, you're responsible for that water. However, if it's happened all by mistake, then we will not be mechayiv. So that's the case of a hukluk echad b'mayim. And in this case, in the Brisa, Reb Meir argues and says, no, in this Niskal Pesheya, even if you fumbled it, you're still going to be chayiv. The next case that they're arguing about is a completely different case, shalaka b'charosis. It fell down, even if it fell down b'pshia. At least that's how the first shot in the Gemara is going to be. It fell b'pshia, and now you have the charge there, and you were mafkarit. According to Rabbi Yehuda, if you're mafkarit, you're going to be potter, because you're not chayiv for a bar unless the bar belongs to you. And according to Rabbi Meir, you're chayiv for a bar even if it doesn't belong to you. And those are the two cases of the Mishnah, which parallel the two cases of the Brisa, and that is the sugya, according to Abaye. But Rabbi Elazar has another approach. Rabbi Elazar Omer, b'shas nefila machlokes. I will concede that b'shas nefila, there's a machlokes of Niskal Pesheya who are not. Aval achar nefila. So Rabbi Elazar, all Rabbi Elazar said was b'shas nefila machlokes. So now we're probing. So what do you mean to say, Rabbi Elazar? If you're saying there's only a machlokes b'shas nefila, so what are you saying? Aval achar nefila my divra kal potter. Are you going to say everybody else is potter? Meaning, let's say the shilas of mafkir boyroi. Are you going to tell me that everybody else is potter? But ikar Reb Meir de machayev. We know Reb Meir is machayev. How do we know Reb Meir is machayev? La'achar nefila. Midikatani bebraysa v'loy solka v'loy amida. Clearly, the Brisa is also speaking about a case of after nefila. Michal de behezek de la'achar nefila pligi, because he had an opportunity to clean it up and he did not. That's la'achar nefila. And Reb Meir says, you're going to be chayev. How could you suggest that they're not arguing? We know for sure Reb Meir holds chayev. Elamai, are you going to say that they're chachamim amoyed Reb Meir, that it's chayev, and therefore they're only arguing b'shas nefila? Elamai divra kol chayev, v'ikar rabbanon de patri. We know the rabbanon pater in the Mishnah's case, in the Brice's case. It says Clara, they're patering la'achar nefila. So clearly they're arguing in both cases. So what do you mean, Rabbi Elazar, when you say? What do you mean, Rabbi Elazar, when you say b'shas nefila machlokes? Elamai b'shas nefila, af b'shas nefila. Don't think they're only arguing about a por. That you were mafker, they're also arguing about Niskal Pesheya. The Kamash Malon Kid Abaye. All Rabbi Elazar wanted to say, he wanted to highlight that we hold like Abaye. Zokt Rashi, the last Rashi in the bottom of Chopta Samar Aleph, when we show the list of the Brisa, Loy Mishtama B'Shas Nefila. If you look at the Brisa refers to both cases of Loy Solkoi V'Loy Omdai. So it's much for the Brisa that there is no discussion here B'Shas Nefila. So Rabbi Elazar felt it important to highlight that. Istrich Rabbi Elazar Lashminon did Akinalami Masnitin the Katanitarti Kid Amar Abayil. Learning the Mishnah, learning the Brisa alone, you would have thought that it's only one case they're arguing about, and that is if you're mafka your bar, lach nefila. It's only from the Mishnah where we're forced to say that there's also a shaila of kodim nefila, because as Abaye said earlier, there's two cases in the Mishnah that are not necessary. It must be that we're speaking about two different machlokes. So that is Rabbi Elazar, who aligns perfectly with Abaye. Now we're going to look at another pshat. Zok the Gemara weiter. Rabbi Yochanan is arguing on Rabbi Elazar, and it's going to change things slightly. Rabbi Yochanan Amar la'achar nefila machlokes. In fact, the only machlokes that there exists between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is la'achar nefila. Once again, the Gemara probes, what does Rabbi Yochanan mean to say? Aval b'shas nefila mai. Does Rabbi Yochanan mean to say that divrei akoil potter? How could you say divrei akoil potter? Rabbi Yochanan said something later that you will prove from those words that Rabbi Yochanan said later that he holds that even b'shas nefila there's a machlokes. What did Rabbi Yochanan say later? Don't say that our Mishnah is going according to Reb Meir. Now, the Mishnah that we're talking about is not the Mishnah that we just learned. It's a different Mishnah. We won't get into what it's talking about. All we need to do is to extract one tidbit of information, and that is that Rabbi Yochanan holds there's a machlokes b'shas nefila. So midikam Rabbi Yochanan l'kamon like tema masnisin he like tema masnisin Rabbi Meir he damer niskal poisheyahu. So Rabbi Yochanan said, don't say that the Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Meir who holds niskal poisheya. Well, that proves that Rabbi Yochanan understands that there's actually a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda by niskal poisheya. Michlal to Rabbi Meir machayev. So you see clearly that Rabbi Yochanan holds that there's definitely a machlokes b'shas nefila if niskal is poisheya. So when Rabbi Yochanan said la'achan nefila machlokes, what does he mean to say? He doesn't mean to say la'achan nefila, but everyone's minded by kodim nefila, because clearly he holds that kodim nefila there's a machlokes as well. Ella, my divrei kal chayev. Are you going to say everyone holds that it's chayev? V'amitikam Rabbi Yochanan l'kamon loy tema masnisin Rabbi Meir he damer niskal poisheyahu mechal de pati rabbanan. I'm sorry, these are really two steps in the Gemara, but I read them as one step. Right? First the Gemara says he must hold the Meir's machayev, but then from the same statement that Rabbi Yochanan made, it proves that he holds that the Rabbanan would pater. So what is Rabbi Yochanan's statement that la'achar nefila machlokes? If in fact he holds that kodim nefila there's a machlokes as well. Hakamash malon hamafkin izakav the hacha hu the pati Rabbanan the anasu. Before in Abaye, we learned that even if it was a case of niskal poisheya, so you were poisheya when you dropped it. So according to Rabbi Meir, it was a niskal, or according to Rabbi Yehuda, if you purposely broke it, your mamish poisheya for this bar being there. Nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda holds if you're mafkir it, you're going to be putter anyway. You could be guilty of sin for this bar here, for this bar being here, but if you're mafkir, you'll be putter. That's a very big kula. You mamish put it there. Rabbi Yochanan argues on that point, and he says, "Ma'afkin izak of the hachu the pati rabbanon the anasu." Only a where does Rabbi Yochanan say that there's a machlokes in our Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda holds if you're mafkir your bar your potter? That's only if you're mafkir a bar that fell by mistake. But if it fell on purpose, there you'll be chai. So el kamashkon the mafkir izak of the hachu the pati rabbanon the anasu. Because it was an oinus if it fell shaloi b'mischavit and you hold this called laf poisheya, that bar that fell, if you were mafkir it, you won't be chayiv for it later. But if you are poisheya, you put a bar there, you put a bar b'shus rabim, and you are mafkir it, you'll still be chayiv. What are you saying, Wally?
The alma means that he put it there.
That's right. So let's see Rashi. The mafkin el kamash Rabbi Yochanan the mafkin is zakab the hacha on the second line of Rashi. The tchilasay honus who the pati rabbanon. Where the rabbanon pati you if you're mafkin your bar if it only got there in the first place because of no fault of your own. Aval mafkin is zakab the alma kegoyin. Now the Rashi is going to outline the case. Sheshlicha midas. You threw something into Rishus Harabim. Uchegoyin bar Rishus Harabim. They're mechayvi. Even though you were mafkin it, and the Torah says. And Rabbi Yehuda learns that if it doesn't belong to you, your potter, that's only if you're not responsible for it being there. But if you're responsible for it being there, you cannot shed that liability, even if you're mafkir. This is what Rabbi Yochanan meant when he said la'achar nefila machlokes. Kloimar hai machlokes the pligi Reb Meir v'Rabbanon behifker nizakov la'achar nefila who shetchilasai al yedei nefila. That's only a machlokes if it fell originally, if it got there through a nefila, which we consider an oinus according to Rabbi Yehuda, this is called la posheya. If you put it there on purpose, loy pligi, everybody would agree. Being mafkir later, after you placed a bar b'shus harabim, you cannot flee liability because even if you're mafkir. Well, I said to Rabbi Yochanan, the b'shas nefila loy pligi.
Man setzt sich an, als der Teure der Kichre ist bo, bis es Rab, meint not halt es.
I guess if you're Pesheya, there's a separate chiyuv.
Das ist ein Pesheya. Someone what a bigger pashaya is than going digging a hole in Shisarab and then being it mafk.
No, the case that they discussed the machlokes is if you dug a bar b'shus hayachid, it's your private property. You made a bar in your backyard, and then later on you were mafked the property around your bar, but the bar you kept for yourself. That's what the machlokes. That's how Rashi outlines where the machlokes. Kizak the Gemara about. So at the end of the day, the two Mahalchim and the Gemara are really identical. The whole difference is that Rabbi Yehuda has a tour for someone who's mafker bar. Is that across the board, or is that only if he's an oinus in placing that bar in the first place? Okay, gewaltig. Zok the Gemara weiter. Itmar mafker nizakav. What if somebody was mafker something that his menace? He was mafker his menace to society. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar. There's a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar. We have a familiar Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar. We just have to pshat him here. Where Rabbi Lazar learned that the Rabbi Yehuda patters if you're mafker in the chasa, even if it was there with a pshia, and Rabbi Yochanan knows only if it wasn't a pshia. So let's see how this plays out. Mafker nezakav, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar argue about it. Chadamar, one of them says chayiv, the Chadamar pater. Guess. Let's see if we can guess who says what. Lema, let's suggest. Man de mechayiv. The man de hold your chayiv if you were mafker in the chasov is Reb Meir. Would go according to Reb Meir. Uman de pater is Kirabanan. So we know there's a machlokes Reb Meir and the Rabbanan. Reb Meir we already learned earlier. Mafker in the chasov is going to be chayiv, and according to the Rabbanan, it's going to be pater. So let's see what the Gemara says. Aliba de Reb Meir kula amaloi pligi. Everybody agrees, according to Reb Meir, for sure it's chayiv. So Rashi, the hashta behifker nezakav abalya the oines mitchila mechayiv. Even if you were mafker nezakav and it only came there because of an oines, Reb Meir holds your chayiv. Kol shekein hefker shetchilasa beratzon. Kol shekein if it's tchilasa beratzon, which is what we're discussing of mafker nezakav when you know it's a peril. Keep ligi. So where is the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar? Is aliba de Rabbanon? They're arguing how the Rabbanon would approach this. Manda Potter, the Mandam holds that mafker nezakav is Potter will hold like the Rabbanon. Umanda mechayiv, and the Mandam who's mechayiv, even according to the Rabbanon, Amalach will tell you another army afilu the Rabbanon. Even in the Rabbanon, I'm going to show you that in certain cases the Rabbanon agree that mafker nezakav is chayiv. Even though we said that the Rabbanon hold mafker nezakav is Potter, because Adkan like Potter Rabbanon. When did the Rabbanon say if you're mafker nezakav you're Potter? Elba mafker nezakav the hacha. Only mafker nezakav the hacha of our case where it was niskalaf b'sheya. Mishum the anasu, because it's an anus. Aval mafker nezakav the alma mechayvi. So this sounds exactly how Rabbi Yochanan learned pshat in our Mishnah. So Zokt Gemara Testayim, the Rabbi Lazar who the Amar Chayiv. Let's say it's Rabbi Lazar who holds Chayiv, which is exactly the opposite of how we just understood the sugya. How do we have a raya that Rabbi Lazar the Amar Chayiv? The Amar Rabbi Lazar Mishum Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Lazar said something in the name of Rabbi Shmuel. Shnei Dvarim. Same Rabbi Lazar, yeah. Shnei Dvarim Einon B'Shus and Shaladim. They don't belong to a person, but also Nakos of Kiluhem B'Shusai just to be Mechayiv. The Torah treats it like it's his B'Shus, even though it's not. Be'eluhen Bar B'Shus Harabim. A Bar B'Shus Harabim is not his, yet the Torah makes you liable for any damages that it does, as if it's yours. And the chametz mishei shoy sulamayla. If you have chametz in your shus mishei shoy sulamayla, it's also about no, it's not yours, but you're chayiv bal yirah and bal yimatzeh for it, as we see in Rashi. Bar b'shus harabim al masvila the Rabbi Lazar. Right off the bat, you see Rabbi Lazar holds the chiva the bar b'shus harabim. You see that there's a chiva bar b'shus harabim, meaning even if you were mafker it, mishei shoy sulamayla ain't chametz b'shusay. The chametz is not in your shus. The Isay Asubana, but also a cost of Kilibishusai Laver Allah Bal Yoro Bal Yamatze. So let's have a look over here. So what did Rabbi Lazar say in the name of Rabbi Shmuel? That a bar, even though it's Bishus Harabim, you're mechuyev for it. So therefore, Tistayim, you have a Klor Raya that Rabbi Lazar holds that you're mechuyev for a bar, even if you're mafkid. Okay, Gabaltik. So
also, if I'm enters the dust, meant as chametz she's effeletz mafki gewein at the zamachir.
I'm not sure. We'll have to learn that in Psach. Zaktimar Umi Amar Rabbi Lazar Hachi. Did Rabbi Lazar actually say such a halacha? In fact, that you'll be chayiv you'll be chayiv for the bar, even though it was an oines, even though you're a mafker. Rabbi Lozer taught us exactly the opposite. The Tan we learned. There was some manure in Rosh Hashanah. Manure has value for fertilizer. So he took his pitchfork. Actually, we'll see, he might have used his hands. But for now, we'll keep it clean. He took his pitchfork and he flips it over. I guess, he wants it to bake on both sides. And now someone comes along and slips on this manure, and he sees that manure there, and he bends down and he takes with his finger a little bit. He tastes it and he says, it looks like it. It smells like it. It tastes like it. Boy, am I happy I didn't step in it. Right? So anyway, he stepped in it and he fell. He went flying. The person who just moved it around a little bit is going to be chayiv. And Rabbi Lozer said, we have to qualify this halacha. He's only mechuyev if the person who flipped it over had kavanah to be kind of the gullo. So now it's his bar, and now he's responsible for it. But if he had no kavanah to be zoich in it, so he was not kind it, potter. So what do you see from here? Alma, you see, mafkin is of potter. So this is exactly the opposite of what we said a moment ago from Rabbi Lozer. Here you see that if it doesn't belong to him, it'll be potter.
Right. So it's mafkin nizokov. It's not nizokov.
What's the difference? If a mafkin is not mine either. What's the difference?
Nah, but he didn't bring it in. He didn't place it.
Oh, very good, very good. So let's have the Gemara for results. Zog the Gemara, Amar Avada, Bar Ava, Shechzir L'Makayma. You know why I'm potter? Because I put it right back where I found it. So I didn't bring it there, and I didn't move it from there. So that's why I'm potter. So there I'll be potter. But if I put a bar somewhere and I'm after it, Avada I'll be chayiv, which I think is what you guys were alluding to. Amar Ravina, Zok Ravina, Mashal Rav Ada Bar Ava. Let me give you an example of what the Rav Ava is saying. It's doimatu lamada over doima lamaitza bar mechgula. You find a peril in Rosh Hashanah, you find an uncovered bar, v'chiseyu, and you covered it up, and then v'chazav v'gileyu. But there you'll be potter. You can't compare.
Yeah, it should be high.
Oh, so that's what Mazutra was saying. Ravina wanted to use that as a sword to its potter. Comes along Rav Mari, comes along Marzut. This is what he talk about. Hasam lo yistalaklu ma'aser rishon. Hacha yistalaklu ma'aser rishon. In the case of the manure, I never took away the peril. The peril is always there. So why should I get shifted the responsibility? But for the case of the bar, the ma'aser rishon was eliminated because I covered it up. What?
Bar is there under the cover.
If it's
By the goal, you've moved it away. It's not there anymore.
Hacha yistalaklu ma'aser rishon. Here it was taken away.
cover it, it says clearly you filled it up. Then
So,
Next to the bar, it's Mestalik. Oh, you're right.
the case of the bar is Mestalik Maserish.
because when the cover, there's no more bar, there's no more peril. But the manure is always there. It's always a peril.
Just turned it over.
He just turned it over. So the peril was always there. So Zok to Gemara, midami hasam lo yistalek l'ma'aser rishon. In the case of the manure, why should I take ownership of the bar? I didn't do anything. It was a peril when I got there, was a peril when I left. But haka yistalek l'ma'aser rishon. You eliminated the bar, and then you went and opened it up. So you're mechuyev for opening it up. So haloi dami, if you want to give an example of why this case of manure should be potter, is as follows: Elamoita bar magula. He found the bar magula v'tamima, and he filled it up with earth, completely closed it. V'chazer v'chafra, and there he dug it up again. The istalkalahu ma'aser rishon. There the ma'aser rishon goes away. The Kamma of I think you're right. I think the Gemara just proved that Moti's right. So let's go back again. In the case of the bar, the Ma'aser Rishon was not removed. Because I just covered it up. There's a hole still here. So Moti's 100% right. Here, yeah, he put it down, but I picked it up, put it down again. So I picked up the bar and I put it back down. So I should be chayiv. You know what this case of the manure is compared to? Where you actually closed up the bar, you filled it up with earth. There for sure you're going to be chayiv. And therefore, in the case of the manure as well, you should be mechuyev for it. Ella, why are you potter for it by the manure unless you had kavana bedavka to be kind of the manure? Ella Amar Ravashi kishahabcha lepachos mishloisha. What you did was you didn't lift it up 3 tvachim. There was never a kinyan made. The chabar pachos miyudami, I guess. It was never nistam the bar. You know why? Because I never lifted it up 3 tvachim. It was always close to the karka. The chivin the loin is chavan leknoisa. The lekel lechiyuve mishum amoinoi. You can't be mechayev me at the moment because I don't own this. I didn't pick it up. I didn't make a hagbah. Mishum koira bar nami lois chayev. You can't be mechayev him because he dug the bar because he never did. Umiyu heichad in chavan liskoi. But if he was mechayev to be koined, there mechayev mishum amoinoi. There he'll be chayev because it's mamoinoi hamazik if he was koined. Dikalamanda Amar, Chavta behevker kani v'loy hagba. Chavta means he hit. Most people change the girsha to habata. Looking at hefker, you're koine v'loy hagba, prepare kabayis v'aliyah. Okay, so here you're not going to be mechuyev for it if you didn't pick it up 3 tvach. Correct Gemara. Umay duchted the Rabbi Lazar the ukmei lo-ukmei koin shahavcha lepachos migimel. Why did Rabbi Lazar have to say it's speaking where you didn't lift it up? Now, there's another point here that the Rishonim add. It also, not only that I didn't lift it up 3 tvachim, I didn't shift it over 3 tvachim either. So it's exactly the same bar in the same place that I never took possession of. But why did Rabbi Lazar have to say, why did he have to explain the price of that way? The timer, the chinas chaven lischusba, and it's only going to be mechayif him if he had kavanah to be koinah. Ha'in mischaven lischusba, but if he didn't have kavanah to be koinah, loy. Why did you say better? Look malamayla migimel. Say he actually lifted up above 3, and he made a kinyan. Bi'afal gavda loy nischaven lischusba, and even though he didn't have kavanah to be koinah, chayiv it will be chayiv. Why didn't he learn it that way? Zok to Gemara. So again, why did Rabbi Lazar have to learn it in such a modna case? Look at the case of the Brisa and look what a modna way Rabbi Lazar explained it as. So what was the case again? So what did Rabbi Lazar say? Why did he say that? Why didn't he just say that regardless? Lukma lamayla migimel. So what does it mean? Rabbi Lazar had a modna case. If I didn't pick it up 3, so then it's only toilet if I was a schaven liskoi, not a schaven liskoi. Why make these funny cases? Stick to a simple case. Why don't you just say that you picked it up completely and that's the case. You know why? Because you picked it up 3 tvachim. Why you say speaking in some other case you didn't pick it up and yet come on? Why complicate things? The simplest way to learn is you picked it up, you made a kinyan, you're chayiv. You know why? Because she say because the lashon of the Mishnah itself, the lashon of the Brisa itself, bothered Rabbi Lazar. Why did the Brisa select the word hafach? It should have said listening higbiyah. He lifted it up. From the fact that the Mishnah used an unusual lashon, just flipped it over, but he didn't actually lift it up. Elishmami no kol hafach lemata mishloishu. The Brisa is telling us specifically a case where you didn't lift it up 3 tvachim, and if you didn't lift it up 3 tvachim, you'll not be koined unless you had kavana to be koined. Gavaltik.
Because if not,
let me just finish this because we're mamish in the middle of a sugya. Umi de Rabbi Lazar Amar Chayiv. So now that we established that Rabbi Lazar holds you're chayiv for a bar, Rabbi Lazar you're chayiv for a bar that you were posheya on. Even if you were mafkir, so then Rabbi Yochanan must say potter. So it must be, we have a process of elimination. 2 people are arguing, Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan. Once we've proven that Rabbi Lazar holds that even ba'onis, you'll be chayiv. If you were mafkir, that's how he learns pshat in the Rabbanon. So obviously Rabbi Yochanan who argues holds it will be potter. The problem is, Rabbi Yochanan doesn't say that. Rabbi Yochanan holds you chayiv. But nan hamatznias hakoytiv is a schuchas. If you hide apparel in Rosh Hashanah, you actually build a fence around your property, not with rocks, but with thorns. So you have a peril that you're putting into Rosh Hashanah. The gather shenafel Rosh Hashanah, or your gather that fell into Rosh Hashanah. And someone got hurt. Chayiv v'niska, you're mechuyev to pay. And Rabbi Yochanan commented on this. You know when you're chayiv, you're only chayiv if your thorns are sticking out into the rishus harabim. If you keep your thorns within your rishus, potter, you'll be potter. So let's think, why should there be that difference? Mitzamtim my time of potter. Why is mitzamtim potter? Why if it's within your rishus, it's potter? Lav mishum da'avalei bar b'shusay. That's because it's a bar b'shusay yochid. And you hold that you're only chayiv if the bar is rishus harabim. Mechlal the chiyuv of the bar is dafka b'shus harabim. So you see clearly, alma mafker nezakav is chayiv. If bar can only be chayiv when it's in rishus harabim, it must be a bar mafker nezakav is chayiv. Zokmer lo, you don't see that in Rabbi Yochanan. Maybe lo'ilam aim aloch mafker nezakav potter. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan knows mafker nezakav potter, and in rishus harabim would be potter. So oibazayu mitzamtim my time of potter. So what's the significance of being mitzamtim if it's within your property? Why is it potter then? Because you were not b'sheya. This is not a question of it's a bar b'shus harabim or not. This is not a bar at all. You know why it's not a bar? Because even though you have thorns there that's facing the rishus harabim, that's not called a pesheya. That's not called a peril at all. You know why? It's not normal for a person to rub up against the wall, and therefore there's no peril. It's not a bird that you have thorns facing the outside. It's like a barbed wire fence. And we know Rabbi Yochanan actually say that. We know Rabbi Yochanan passes like a stam mishnah. Now we learned so you see clearly Rabbi Yochanan holds you're chayiv bar b'shus harabim, which means a bar is hefker. So Eibazoi must be that Rabbi Yochanan holds. Rabbi Yochanan knows that you're chayiv even ba'oinus. If you were mafker and it's Rabbi Lazar who is mekel. Rabbi Yochanan merchayiv, Rabbi Yochanan merchayiv, Rabbi Lazar potter. Correct the Gemara, but the problem is, Amar Mishum Rabbi Shmuel. Didn't we just quote from Rabbi Lazar Mishum Shmuel that even though it's not yours, you're still chayiv for it? So you see a bar that doesn't belong to you, you're chayiv for. So you said at the beginning because you asked, right? You asked me Rabbi Lazar. So at the end of the day, it's exactly how we learned the sugya. That Rabbi Yochanan makes that distinction. Rabbi Yochanan, even according to the Rabbanon, if you were Paisheya and you were Mafker, you're Chayiv, and even if you were not Paisheya, you're going to be Chayiv, and even though it was an ayis at the beginning, and Rabbi Lazar holds, it would be Potter. Gewaltig.
What's the tomorrow?
Tomorrow, once again, we're going to learn an hour before mincha.